Parker, welcome back to the podcast. I really want to get into the subject that we just barely touched on. But as you brought up, the objectification that goes along with pornography. And again, to my listeners, I want to tell you, Parker, because my listeners are fairly okay with some of the subjects that we're talking about. I've had, I'm always scared of overwhelming, because I have an audience of teenagers, moms, parents, um, overwhelming them. But the feedback that I get, particularly when I talk about this particular subject, is an overwhelming thank you for talking about this. No one talks about this. No one is mentioning this. So I do feel that what we're about to dive into is a very vital conversation for our listeners. So I wanted to mention that. And to my listeners, thank you for listening and staying with us through this.
So, when we're talking about some of the other issues with pornography and how it impacts our society and our world, and objectification being one of those things that you mentioned, the issue with pornography is that research shows that individuals who consume porn are more likely to objectify people in their lives, including the people that they love and care about. And objectification is when you no longer see someone as a human with thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And instead, you treat them like an object, the way that you would sit on a chair or use something, right, for its purpose. But when we are sexually objectifying people, we don't see them as a human with value. We don't think about their sense of humor, how they feel, the things that we found so incredible about them when we first met somebody, for example. And now instead we just see them as an object to gratify our own sexual desires. So there are many issues with that. Everything from the fact that pornography contributes to objectification to the fact that there's research showing how pornography creates gender inequality. Recent research shows that individuals who consume porn, when measuring individuals who don't consume porn and people who consume pornography, we find that people who consume porn have much more sexist beliefs after consuming pornography than they did before they consumed pornography.
You talked about pornography leads to this objectification. Can you expand on how? Because I'm assuming most of my audience, I mean, there might be some that watch a lot of stuff, but the whole point of your organization is fight the new drug. And we talked about in the beginning of this in part one about how pornography affects the brain and how it acts like a drug on your system, like a drug. So if we go down that road and go down that rabbit hole as a drug and then tie in this objectification of women and girls, can you expand on how that occurs and what we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that helps kind of clarify this for people is talking about some really well known research that's kind of like Psych 101, if you were in a college course. And that's research on supernormal stimuli. So there was this guy named Dr. Nicholas Tinbergen, and he actually won the Nobel Prize for his research discovering what we now refer to as a supernormal stimulus. And he was studying butterflies. He was looking at male and female butterflies to find what the male butterflies found most attractive and eye-catching about their female counterparts.
Okay.
And then he wanted to create some fake cardboard butterflies and try to exaggerate the features that he thought the male butterflies found most attractive. So when he made these decoy butterflies, he tried to make the wings bigger, the colors on the wings brighter, and the shapes, the patterns on the wings more exaggerated than what you would find in nature. And when he did this and put the male and female butterflies in an enclosure with these fake cardboard butterflies, the male butterflies actually lost interest in the real female butterflies and instead tried to mate with the fake cardboard decoys. So Dr. Timbergen was shocked by this. It wasn't his hypothesis. That's not what he thought was going to happen. So he asked himself, well, what did I do? And he said, I created an artificial exaggeration of something natural. And over time, the brain preferred the exaggeration to what was normal, natural, and healthy. And many researchers today, if you don't see where I'm going with this, consider pornography to be a super normal stimulus because everything in porn, from its accessibility to how people look and interact with each other, are just as fake and counterfeit as those cardboard butterflies. And research shows that over time, individuals who consume porn can lose interest in pursuing real life relationships or like a partner and instead just become obsessed with consuming and seeking out pornography. So when we understand that pornography can be a supernormal stimulus, because supernormal stimulus impacts all of us, right? It's not just these butterflies. That's just when we first started to discover this. Anything with a brain can be impacted by a supernormal stimulus. And the fact that researchers today consider porn to be a supernormal stimulus shows how it can, over time, lead us to objectify people, because we're just looking for that next new thing. And we're not seeking out real relationships with a partner or treating our partners with the respect that they deserve.
I'm glad you mentioned that about not treating your partners with the respect that they deserve, because from what I understand on Pornhub, um, the majority of things that are searched for, in addition to young, teen, incest, are rape, violence, choke, punching, hurting, those type of things. Can you, because that's what I'm referring to when I say how it's affecting these young people when they're, seeing sex for the first time or whatever. Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, I think maybe a way to say that is, the question we're posing is, does porn impact sexual templates? Does it affect what we expect to be normal in a sexual relationship with a partner in real life? And research and personal accounts show over and over again that unfortunately it does. That's one of the biggest problems with pornography, especially the fact that people are exposed at such a young age, is that what we're seeing in pornography is that we're supposed to be violent when we're intimate. That, there's no consent. There's no asking if a partner's comfortable. There's no making sure that they still want to proceed. Instead, what we see is violence. Recent research shows that 88% of popular porn scenes contain physical violence and aggression. 49% of those same scenes contain verbal violence and aggression. And in almost every instance of this violence and aggression, it was targeted specifically at women. And if that's not enough, 98% of the time of these instances of violence and aggression, the women's response to this violence and aggression was to react with pleasure, because that's what we want to see in pornography, unfortunately. And so it literally trains us to think that that's what is expected of us, that we are supposed to be violent when we're intimate. And both men and women consume pornography. There's no diversifying factor that makes you immune from porn's impacts. Recent research shows both men and women consume porn in high percentages. But we need to understand the impact that it's having on all of us, on our society, because there's even research to show that individuals who consume porn are more likely to carry out sexual violence in real life.
That part right there is huge. I just want to repeat some of this. 88%. Did I get that right? 88%?
Yeah, there's a few studies that I can quote,
That's
that obviously
huge.
have varying degrees depending on the measures that they used. We typically say between 35 and 88% of popular porn scenes contain physical violence and aggression, depending on the research you're looking at. So, on the low end, some research shows a little over a third of scenes, and on the high end, some research shows almost 9 out of 10 scenes. So,
I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know how it works, but I'm assuming it depends on what the person is searching for. Like maybe if there's an algorithm or something.
So this research was researchers analyzing like popular porn scenes,
Ah,
and
thank
really
you.
the only reason for the difference in that percentage, the reason we would say 35 to 88%, is one study defined this as violence and aggression, and one study decided these things are what we're going to classify as violence and aggression.
I
And
understand.
so
But
that showed a range within the research, and we just want to be transparent about that.
no, thank you for that. I think the take home is that, hey, a lot of this stuff that is being watched out there is violent, aggressive towards women, and the women in pornography, their reaction to it is pleasure. And that is a major recipe for disaster, because then what occurs is brings me to my next point, which is, now let's take sex trafficking. Let's take the fact that um, holding someone against their will, fraud, force, coercion would not exist unless you had men showing up to buy the women and buy the girls to pleasure themselves for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes a pop. I'm not really sure exactly. It depends on where. But all along, anyone that works in the trafficking industry will tell you it's supply and demand. And what I always talk about is, okay, but what is creating this demand? Because the normal average person goes, how can someone possibly show up to a seedy motel, see a little kid or a young girl who's obviously there against her will, and go ahead and proceed and do what they want to do to that person's body? And to me, that's the link between what you guys do and what you're showing, and how you've collated all the research, collated all the facts, and are putting it out there for people to understand. Here we go. You've got an industry that is between 30 and 80%, 88% violence against women and young girls. It's horrifying. I don't think it takes a college professor or anything more to go, what is creating the demand out there?
Yeah, so you kind of mentioned something we touched on briefly at the start, that it's an escalating behavior, right? Research shows that individuals who consume porn, that behavior tends to escalate over time. So if we were to use a simple example of this, something everyone's familiar with is like smoking.
Yeah.
Everyone likely knows someone who smokes or used to smoke, or they're at least familiar with the practice, right? And if you were to ask someone who smokes or used to smoke how that behavior started, it's likely that they would tell you they started smoking 1 or 2 cigarettes, or they tried it. But if they're still smoking, or if that behavior escalated, obviously, right, they started smoking more. And that process in the brain is called desensitization. So the brain is desensitized to that input, and it needs more of something to get the same pleasure response in the brain. So with smoking, we see that someone goes from trying a cigarette or smoking 1 or 2 cigarettes to, over time, that behavior escalates, and they smoke maybe a pack of cigarettes a day, maybe in extreme scenarios, 2 packs of cigarettes a day. The same thing happens with pornography, but with porn, that desensitization looks a little bit different. Not only do they need more of something more frequently, so with smoking, we see they need more cigarettes more often, right? With porn, they not only need it more often or more of it more frequently, but they also tend to need more extreme forms of content. So this has various effects on all of the things that we've talked about, because that means that now there is a demand for more extreme content to be produced, which means that the sexual exploitation and the sex trafficking is being fueled by that more extreme content. The sexual abuse of performers, those kinds of things, the sex trafficking that we talked about earlier. It also means that the individual who needs that more extreme version of something is more likely to seek out purchasing sex in real life, whether that be from a minor or an adult, whether those people are consenting or held against their will and sex trafficked. It can all be debated, but the point is that that behavior escalates over time. It leads them to need more extreme content, which is already problematic, and it can lead them to other things, like you're saying, purchasing sex in real life, more unhealthy and often illegal behaviors.
100%. And the worst part about it is that all they've seen all day, however often that they are watching this stuff, is that women enjoy this.
Yeah, exactly.
That this is enjoyable violence and aggressive. Like, we're talking about physical violence. We're talking about physical aggression. You also mentioned verbal abuse. So being called horrible names and all of these things
Yeah,
while
yelled at, horrible names, wild things.
yeah.
You scroll around on the homepage of these pornography websites, it is shocking the content that we are like, you can't do that. And then
Oh,
porn is just like, huh, we get away with it. It is
wow.
absolutely insane, the fact that they just seem to be able to get away with these kinds of things. The research showing, like you said,
Like
gender
racial
inequality that we
slurs and
talked about
stuff, you
earlier,
mean?
racial slurs, yeah,
Mm.
I mean, all sorts of things, or the verbal abuse that you're talking about. Yeah, there's recent research showing that pornography fuels racism, because porn sites tend to use inappropriate racial slurs that we would never accept in 2023, and they seem to
Mhm.
get a free pass on using it in titles, because that content needs to be shocking, and that makes our brain want to click on it, right? So that content's shocking, we want to click on it, it gets more views, and they seem to just get a free pass on this. And there are wonderful resources and experts on all of these things that we've talked about today, that you can talk to, if or that you can learn more from. So, for example, some of our resources like our podcast, you can learn more about these issues with racism and pornography, or gender inequality and its relation to pornography, sex trafficking. A great article that came out a few years ago, Nicholas Kristoff did a wonderful piece for the New York Times that's been talked about on here before, called The Children of Pornhub, and the fact that there's so much illegal and underage content on their website. Afterward, I think they removed 80% of their content within a day or two. Um, and many people want to say, well, in defense of them, they just removed all the content from unverified accounts. So it's not like all of that content is child abuse or illegal or revenge porn. I'm like, one video is one too many.
Thank you.
We're not just going to give them a free pass because they took down every unverified
No,
account.
and
The
let's say
fact that they were
took it
using
down.
unverified accounts in the first place is a problem.
Exactly.
That should not have been happening in the first place.
And let's talk about the fact that many, many, many women have called and contacted Pornhub and say, "That's my rape video. That's me being raped. Take it down, take it down, take it down." And they ignored. So great that the New York Times and Nicholas Kristoff did that incredible article. And they did take it down for what? 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Just a little bit of time. We're not, don't get me wrong, for anyone watching Pornhub, make no mistake, there is 100% sexual abuse up there right now in present time as you're watching it. It's not like, do not get me wrong. That was a nice thing that they did for 2 weeks while the heat was on them, but it's all still there.
Yeah,
Hence
there's
the
definitely
lawsuits.
still
Yeah.
problematic content hosted on the websites. Absolutely. And I apologize for talking over you, Marisol. I got a little fired up there for a brief moment, and I apologize.
Please do. No, that's what we're here for. I do it all the time. It's no problem. Trust me.
If there's anything anyone's taking away from this conversation, these 2 episodes, that they want to go later and be able to learn more, please, I would encourage you to go on our website and look up the Girls Do Porn content on ftnd.org or fightthenewdrug.org if you want to type it all out. Because we are fortunate enough to have some blog posts with the survivor, podcast episodes with the survivor of Girls Do Porn, one of the members of the lawsuit, as well as some video content as well, talking about her story. So I would encourage you strongly to go listen to that. It's really hard to listen to someone who's been through what Jane Doe, this particular Jane Doe, there's 22 of them, has been through, and not start to really question the industry. You know, we're willing to say, you know, big pharma, there's these issues, but big porn is a problem too. You know, just like big tech, there's big porn and there are problems out there. And I think hearing a survivor story like that can really
Can
help
you actually
cement
share
some of the
that
things
with
we've
the
talked
audience that
about.
are driving in their car and listening to this? Can you talk about one of those Jane Does? I know that I'm particularly sure which one you're talking about, but would you mind just sharing a brief? And then for anyone who wants to know more, we'll direct them to of course, to the website.
Yeah, I think we kind of refrain from. I mean, obviously, she's Jane Doe. Her name's kept private, but we refrain from saying like what number of Jane Doe as well. We try to.
Of course.
So her story was one of the ones that we kind of discussed earlier, where she was a young woman that was reached out to about modeling some clothing, was flown out to California. When she arrived there, she was picked up by someone at the airport, and this person essentially became her. I want to use the right language, but essentially became the person that made sure that she couldn't leave after that. One of the things she talks about early in her story is going. He asked if she wanted some food. The like security guy that picked her up. Mm-hmm. And he took her to go get food. And when they got there, she like ordered a sandwich and ate it. And he's like, "That's kind of weird that you ate the whole thing." And she's like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah, people don't usually want to eat before the shoot." And she kind of thought that was a little weird. And that was where, from then till the end of her ordeal, it was like, that was the beginning of her starting to question, like, whoa, wait a minute. I met these people on the internet. I went to a website that seemed professional. Someone called me and said that they'd done work for them before, but like, I really don't know if any of that's verifiable. And unfortunately, she was then taken to a hotel, essentially kept in the suite and forced to produce pornography for well over 12 hours, being raped, drugged, sexually abused, forced to sign contracts. Um, and then they tried to get her to stay. She was able to get away and to get them to leave her alone, and she was able to fly home. But then she had to deal with the issue at home of no one believing her,
Mm.
because it's so much easier for our society to believe that you made a bad decision than it is to believe that this entire company's content was designed and to create a model of abuse that could be profited from, that they are filming young people who are inexperienced and taking advantage of them, and then shipping them off, uh, and editing the content later to look like it was all consensual, or forcing them during certain moments to smile or to act a certain way so that the content is believable, and threatening to blackmail them or not pay them or trick them or withhold that, not let them go, things like that, if they don't just do what they're told. And I think anyone can have compassion for someone like that. It's easier in those moments, I would assume, to just do whatever is being asked of you to hope that this abuse can be over, that this can just stop, right? And that's kind of how her story went. So
Thank you for sharing that. And for the audience, Fight the New Drug, ftnd.org or fightthenewdrug.org. There are many, many, many stories to not only read, but also to hear from the women themselves and what happened to them. And this is just so everyone knows that this is not like, once in a while that we're talking about. This is a regular operating basis. This is how this industry goes. It's not, um, I don't know how else to put it, say the word voluntary, but it's not voluntary. This is this is rape we're talking about. This is sexual abuse that we're talking about, that is monetized at the expense of individuals, and consumers are watching this, I'm assuming unknowingly, and consuming it, and it really is normalizing something horrific. So I love what you do, Parker. I love your organization. I think we need to get the word out. I want to say that there's been lots of celebrities that have also come forward themselves that you highlight sometimes. If you can name a few that have said, that they've had problems with this, or that they no longer will consume this, or et cetera, but have spoken out against this industry.
yeah, I mean, everyone from Terry Crews to a few years ago Billie Eilish have spoken out about porn and the way they think it impacted their lives. uh, Terry Crews definitely a lot. He has spoken about it in public live events, like speaking engagements. He's been in some of our content. He's done campaigns on social media to raise awareness on porn's impacts, because he felt like it impacted his life and his family and was unhealthy. You can read his book as well to learn more about his journey. And then, Billie Eilish was a few years ago on Howard Stern, and she talked about how she was exposed to porn at a young age and how it literally scared her, how
Yeah.
aggressive and abusive the content that she was seeing was. It made her afraid of having relationships with people in real life. Um, and yeah, and you can listen to that interview as well, or read about it on our website. But there's no shortage of people speaking up about this issue, but we always need more.
Hmm.
And we hope that anyone who's listened to this far into these two episodes, we hope that you have a sense of wanting to do something to help raise awareness. And that might start with the first step of you considering before consuming pornography to stop consuming pornography, or that might be you being willing to speak up, to someone who consumes porn, and help educate them and raise awareness in a non-shaming way and help them to make healthier decisions. Or you might be a parent or community member who is learning about this for the first time, or has long been concerned about this issue, and you want to do more. One of the best things that you can do, honestly, at this point, is to consider booking a presentation for us. We do live presentations all over, and consider having us come to your children's school, to your college campus, to do a community event somewhere in your community to help get this information out to people. Because as much as we can post on social media and do all of these different campaigns, one of the most effective things is to have a live event in your community and be able to talk about this issue face to face, to have live Q&A, to talk about the issue, to get you resources and support, and bring all of that to your community. So
That's phenomenal. I always like to end each episode with something that someone can do. So thank you for explaining what
yeah.
actually can be done. And for those
Yeah,
of
there's hope
you,
in all of this. Things are getting better. We can make an
Mhm,
impact. Like, good things can come of this.
absolutely. And honestly, for people listening, they have some of the best merch I've ever seen. Like, I'm fairly jealous as a nonprofit that I don't have as good merch as you guys do. They have baseball caps and t-shirts that say consider before consuming. People are not products, are one of my favorite campaigns that you have. I have like many of your shirts I'm wearing. For those of you that are watching it on YouTube, this is one of their shirts, if you can see in the camera. Like, they've really, really good merch. But what I like about it is that I've turned a lot of people on to what you do. And so they'll see the merch and they'll be like, I love those guys. Or I follow those guys. Or someone will just go, what is it? What does your t-shirt say? Well, what does that mean? People are not products. And it opens up the conversation. Consider before consuming. What does that mean? And it opens up the conversation. It helps spread education without shame, as you mentioned. And for me, it's always about spreading the word, educating people so that they can make healthy decisions, keep their families safe, and tell others and spread the word until we no longer ever have to do anything like this ever again. So, Parker, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having us, Marisol. You're incredible.
To my audience, please go to fightthenewdrug.org or ftnd.org. Join the fight. And thank you for joining us on the Marisol Nichols podcast. Thank you for listening to the Marisol Nichols podcast. And please do not forget to click like and subscribe. And a big shout out to WD Hahn for our theme song, Something's Gotta Change. See you next time.